to do those kind of things. We don't intend to make bad decisions. We just don't. We can't plan for everything. We just can't. I would like to be prepared for everything in my life. But fact is, things happen. Things set us off. We make snap decisions, and the best intentions are derailed. They come seemingly out of nowhere. They come without warning. They just happen, and all of our good intentions somehow go awry. And I want to piggyback a little bit on Easter Sunday's message, where we talked about Peter a little bit. And I want you to reverse with me a little bit in your mind to that moment that I built you into last Sunday, where Peter had the greatest failure of his life. He denied Jesus Christ 3 times. You know, when Peter left the house that Thursday morning, he never intended, not once did he intend to fail. Not once did it ever cross his mind that he was going to deny Jesus Christ 3 times. That was never in Peter's thinking. He had the best of intentions for that day. It was the Passover time. It's Passover season. They were going to go to a prearranged room, and they were going to take the Lord's, or they were going to commemorate the Passover. Peter never intended to deny the Lord. And you know what? When I look at scriptural examples, Adam and Eve never intended to eat of that tree. Adam and Eve, they didn't premeditate that. They just somehow found themselves in that situation where their best intentions went awry. And you know what? When I've sinned in my life, I'd have to say, it's usually not because I intended to sin. Now, there may be some premeditated sin, and sometimes people are like, well, I'm going to do it. I don't care what anybody thinks. But a lot of times, good-hearted men and women that just want to do right, we have the best of intentions, but somehow we wind up in this situation that we never intended to be in. I can't change what's already happened, but I think I can help you this morning, give you some warning signs, some ways that we can avoid making bad decisions going forward. The first thing I've noticed when I think about what is the groundwork, what is the foundation for failure, the first thing I've noticed is people have this tendency to be, how should I put it, overconfident or self-reliant. Overconfident, self-reliant. In other words, I'm strong enough, I can do this thing. In fact, I've seen it where people get to the point where they're so filled with their own strength and their own talent and their own ability that they become self-reliant rather than Christ-reliant. They begin to depend on their own talent and their own personality and their own abilities and their own education and their own career. And they forget, wait a minute, back up the truck. I need God to be in the center of all of this. When we look at the life of Peter specifically, I want to point out a few things to you. Let's look at verse 31 of Matthew chapter 26. Matthew 26 and verse 31. Jesus begins to tell the disciples, this very night you will all fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. These are prophetic words of Jesus, and they're not comfortable words to his passionate disciples that have lived serving him and walking with him and seeing his miracle ministry for 3 years. They didn't like the sound of this. Look at verse 33, just 2 verses down. Here's what Peter replied. Look at this. Peter replied, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. Look a little bit further down at, I believe it's verse 35. Let's look at what Peter adds to this. But Peter declared, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And all the other disciples said the same. But I want to focus on Peter. 3 times in those 2 verses, he used that big word, I. Now, Peter was self-confident. In fact, Peter was overconfident. Peter was filled with all of this charisma. He had all this authority. He was the one that had declared Jesus Christ is more than just a man. This is the Messiah. This is the Old Testament fulfillment. Peter had a lot of confidence in who he was. He was strong in his authority. He was confident in his ability. In fact, he was a little bit overconfident in who he was. And I think when we think about Peter's downfall, you can almost hear the swagger in his voice, folks. You can almost hear the swagger in his voice. He's like, I don't know about the rest of these peons, but I'll tell you right now, I am never going to fail. I am strong enough. I don't care. He says, even if I have to die with you, Lord, I'll die for you. Right? You hear the swagger? Is that like a funny word? When I said swagger, these kids were like, all right. The swag. All right. That's a good word. Yeah. Caitlin's doing a little bit of swag. Right? I'm not going to deny. I don't know about the rest of you boys, but this boy right here, I got it. Isn't it interesting that pride and sin both have an I right in the middle of it? Think about that. S-I-N, P-R-I-D-E. It's always about I. When we think about how do I avoid my downfall, the first thing you have to consider is never become so full of myself that I forget my strength always comes from Him. We need Jesus today.